So what did they do wrong with Peyton Gendron, and how can we learn from it? But that's not at all what our leaders are asking tonight, hardly.
Tucker starts with a reasonable question so that he can then refute it and create an adversary to be angry with.
Instead, they're asking the only question that ever occurs to them.
Convenient pop-up picture of Joe Biden immediately after something negative is said creates a negative impression in the mind.
How exactly can I benefit from this? How can I leverage this tragedy to my advantage?
Tucker paints Democrats as self-serving, out of touch, and power-hungry, despite Democrats just wanting everyone to live in a peaceful society free from violence.
How can other people's suffering make me more powerful? It didn't take long for Joe Biden to find a way.
Just a few sentences into the monologue and we've already bashed Biden.
Biden flew to Buffalo this morning to speak about what Peyton Gendron did. There have been a number of mass murders since Biden became president. Some of them have been racially motivated. A little over a year ago, in fact, there was even another supermarket massacre that happened to have the same casualty total. A Syrian-born man murdered 10 people in Boulder, Colorado. He even used the same caliber rifle that Peyton Gendron brought to Buffalo. But Joe Biden didn't bother to fly to that crime scene. He didn't go to any of them, in fact.
Tucker cites a relatively unknown shooting from a year ago, even though there are approximately 100 shootings in America per day. In addition, the suspect was Syrian-born, though he may have been a citizen, conveniently stoking anti-foreign animus. This is an apples-to-oranges comparison where the Buffalo shooter left an extensive hyper-nationalistic rant and manifesto, and it's unknown whether the Syrian-born shooter did the same.
Biden went to Buffalo today because he thought he could blame his political opponents for what happened there, which of course he promptly did.
Nowhere in Biden's 20-minute speech did he name a political opponent or party directly. Rather, he condemned the ideology of white supremacism and replacement theory.
Watch.
And other nations ask me, heads of state in other countries, ask me, what's going on? What in God's name happened on January 6th? What happened in Buffalo? What happened? They'll ask.
January 6th and the Buffalo massacre. So how is a political protest at the Capitol...
Don't forget that on January 6th, the peaceful transfer of power for the first time in the United States history was interrupted. Windows and doors were violently broken down. Peace officers were physically assaulted and abused. People defecated in the Capitol Rotunda. Confederate flag was carried into the Capitol building for the first time. The Speaker of the House, the third highest political office in the country, had property stolen from her office. A man with zip ties rappelled onto the House floor. A crowd chanted to execute the Vice President of the United States by the medieval method of hanging, all of which is by definition a seditious insurrection. Plus 10 propaganda points.
Related to a murder spree by a demented teenager in New York State over the weekend. What do those two events have in common? And who exactly are these unnamed heads of state who are connecting these non-connected events in conversations with Joe Biden?
Tucker makes us think about a shadowy cabal of national leaders instead of a white nationalist rant and murder spree, which may have been connected to and inspired by his own program's propaganda.
You may have wondered that, but don't ask, because it's not meant to be asked. It is instead a dream sequence. It's a rhetorical device meant to connect everything that might challenge Joe Biden and bunch all of these things together in the same repulsive moral category.
When logic fails, confuse the audience and bash Biden.
January 6th, mass murder, the bubonic plague, it's all the same, it's all bad. And because it's bad, Joe Biden informed us today, after 250 years, we're going to have to suspend the Bill of Rights. And we're going to begin where the Bill of Rights begins, with the freedom of speech.
Tucker has now gone from 1, murder is bad, 2, Biden condemned it, so therefore 3, the Bill of Rights and the First Amendment is about to be suspended, even though changing amendments to the Constitution requires a 2/3 vote of Congress. Truly, Tucker's logic is dizzying.
You can't prevent people from being radicalized to violence, but we can address the relentless exploitation of the internet to recruit and mobilize terrorism.
The relentless exploitation of the internet to recruit and mobilize terrorism. Okay. But can anyone show, has anyone ever shown, that this specific case, Peyton Gendron, was, quote, recruited and mobilized by the internet? Well, no, in fact. By his own account, he was mentally ill. He snapped. He'd been planning this for a long time. He did what his diseased brain commanded him to do. The internet did not make him do it. He did it himself.
It's sad to say, but broken clocks can occasionally not be entirely wrong. Though Biden was not wrong in generally speaking about the radicalizing nature of certain parts of the internet and social media, the motivations of this particular shooter have yet to be fully understood. -1 propaganda point.
But even if Gendron had been, quote, radicalized by what he read on the internet, what then exactly? Many have been radicalized by what they've read. Pol Pot was radicalized by reading Das Kapital. He went on a murder spree. He killed more than 1 million people. Should we ban that book? Should we ban all books All internet sites that, quote, radicalize people? What exactly is Joe Biden saying here? Well, he's saying that thanks to what happened in Buffalo over the weekend, you no longer have any rights at all, including the most basic, which is to read what you want.
Tucker outright lies about the content of Biden's 20-minute speech, which he knows most people who view a show will never actually listen to, plus 3 propaganda points for the egregious nature of this lie.
People in jail. Who would those people be? Well, thanks to the Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer of New York, we now know. Schumer just sent a letter to our bosses here at Fox News blaming this show for the mass murder in Buffalo, as well as several other mass shootings in recent years.
That's wrong. Chuck Schumer's letter, which you can read online by Googling it, does not cite Tucker's show. Chuck Schumer's letter does ask Mr. Murdoch to cease the dissemination of white nationalist far-right theories on his network. It also does not blame the network for past incidents. It merely cites the recent incident as one of many.
According to Chuck Schumer, this show spreads, quote, dangerous rhetoric and needs to be pulled off the air immediately in the name of public safety.
Chuck Schumer said none of those things. Doubling down on a lie makes for double the entertainment.
Now again, Chuck Schumer is a federal official. He is the leading Democrat in the United States Senate. And he is calling for media censorship. Now,
is this part of Tucker's dream? Schumer's letter asked Mr. Murdoch not to amplify fringe theory. If a 2-page non-legally binding letter, which was immediately shredded by Mr. Murdoch's secretary and which Tucker never bothered to read, constitutes a formal declaration of the suspension of the First Amendment, then the Democrats are far more powerful than I would have thought.
There was a time, like maybe 18 months ago, and that would be considered a direct violation of the First Amendment. Now we hear it every day. Let's throw them in jail.
Wouldn't that be refreshing if we heard, "Let's throw them in jail every day," from Merrick Garland? Alas, Tucker is probably remembering what he said to his assistant when he received that letter from Chuck Schumer. Just throw out the mail.
We wanted to hear more from Chuck Schumer about this. We invited him on the show tonight, as we always do. And because he is a coward, this is the only media appearance probably in history he's turned down.
It always feels good to end on a good old tried-and-true ad hominem. After we've lied about and demonized the top-elected Democrat in Congress for 4 minutes, we'll impugn his character with a schoolyard jab worthy of a pouty 6-year-old who wasn't able to use a swing set at lunch. You big meanie.